6D, fractions and decimals. Okay, so now that we've dealt with fractions and doing operations on fractions, it's time to deal with fractions versus decimals. So to start with this, I'd like to introduce you to two terms. Rational numbers and irrational numbers. Well, as you can tell from the names here, rational numbers are those that think things through, they're very calm in tense situations, always very clear-minded. And irrational numbers are those that are hot-headed, they tend to react quickly and instinctively instead of thinking things through properly. Well, no, not really. Okay? Rational numbers are numbers that can be written in the form of a ratio of integers. So they can be written in the form A over B. I don't really need that equal sign there. Where both A and B are integers. Okay? So rational numbers can be written in that form. And rational numbers, when you do that division, will either terminate, means that the decimal will stop on its own at some point, or it will start repeating. So it'll have a pattern where it repeats a certain number of digits over and over and over again. Example of this may be 2/5, right? Integer divided by an integer, 2/5, which happens to be equal to 0.4. Notice it terminates, it stops on its own. 1/3, which as a decimal is 0.3 repeating. So it repeats, and that 3 will go on forever. Those are rational numbers. They either terminate or repeat, and they can be written in the form of the ratio of two integers. As opposed to rational numbers are not rational, meaning they cannot be written in the form of the ratio of two integers, and they will never terminate or repeat. Examples of those: pi. Pi is an irrational number. 3.1415 ... right? That number goes on forever, it never terminates, it never repeats, there is no pattern to it for us to follow, but it goes on forever. Another one is the Euler constant, E. If you look at your scientific calculator, you have an e to the x button. If you were to plug in 1 for the x, you would get the value of E, and that's approximately 2.71828 ... But that's another number that goes on forever. It is irrational. Another example would be the square root of 3. Okay? Square root of 3 is an irrational number. It will go on forever. So rational versus irrational. Well, how does that fit into the scheme of number systems that we've talked about already? Well, let me get this out of the way and I'll show you. Now we talked about a bunch of numbers and we said, first of all, there's the natural numbers, right? Natural numbers are the counting numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Then there are the whole numbers. Whole numbers are the natural numbers with the addition of 0, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then there are the integers. Integers are the whole numbers with signs, plus or minus. Integers are part of rational numbers. Rational numbers, remember, are those that terminate or repeat. So integers are part of that. They terminate. They terminate by the ones place at the latest. Whole numbers are part of integers. Natural numbers are part of the whole numbers. So rational goes outside of this. And then there's another grouping, the numbers that are not rational. Over here, irrational. Irrational numbers. And both of these are part of the set of real numbers. So real numbers include rational and irrational. Within rational you have integers. Within integers you have whole numbers. Within whole numbers you have natural numbers. So we've just kind of expanded upon the groupings that we had previously. So let's work on determining whether a number is rational or irrational. Okay, so let's look at a number and see. Negative 2.5. Is that rational or irrational? Well, what makes a number rational? It can be written as a ratio of integers, and it either terminates or it repeats. Negative 2.5. Well, first of all, I see that it doesn't continue on, so it terminated. So that's got to be a rational number. Well, the definition said that it can either terminates or repeats. It also said it can be written as a ratio of integers. Well, negative 2.5 can be written as negative 5 over 2. If you plug that into your calculator, negative 5 divided by 2, you're going to find it out to be negative 2.5. So it is definitely rational. It can be written as a ratio of integers, and it terminates or it repeats. What about 4.836279, where the 7 and 9 have a bar over them? Remember that bar says repeat. So I have 4.836279, 79, 79, 79, 79, 79. Well, does it terminate? No, it goes on forever. Does it repeat? Yes, it does. It's got this repeating bar, so that is also rational. What about negative 0.0423981725 ... Is that number rational? Well, this ... that ellipsis means that it continues on, but it did not have a repeating bar, so it's not saying it repeats, it just means it keeps going forever. So the answer is no, that is not rational, so it's irrational. What about the square root of 4? Is that rational? Well, the square root of 4 is 2. Yep, it's rational. What about the square root of 5? Well, let's grab a calculator and see. If I take the square root of 5, we get 2.236067977. Okay? Now, please be aware that when you take a radical like this and use it in your calculator, that just because the number stopped somewhere does not mean that it terminated. It means it ran out of digits. This is an irrational number. And I can pretty safely tell you that anytime you have the square root of a number that is not a perfect square, it's irrational. If the number inside is a perfect square, notice that 2 times 2 gives us 4. Perfect, okay? There isn't any number, any whole number that I can square to get 5. That's going to be irrational. Okay, so that's determining whether a number is rational or irrational. So let's move forward with this. So we've got that information. Now let's look at converting between fractions and decimals. Okay, if we're converting between fractions and decimals, actually converting from a fraction to a decimal is pretty straightforward, because remember, a fraction a over b, that's just saying a divided by b, right? That fraction is just a division. So to convert from a fraction to a decimal, all you do is divide. Three ninths. Well, we know that reduces down to 1/3, but that doesn't get it to a decimal. If I want to turn that into a decimal, I just plug it into my calculator. 1 divided by 3 equals, or I could do it longhand, right? I could do long division, but 1 divided by 3 is equal to 0.3333333, right? 1.3333, or 0.3 repeating, which is a rational number. So all we have to do to convert from a fraction to a decimal is divide. Let's do another example. Three tenths. 3 divided by 10, plug it into your calculator, and you get 0.3. Rational number, and that's it. Doesn't matter. What if I do something, what if I take an improper fraction? 19 fifths. Okay, I'm just going to do it right here. 19 fifths. Right? It's just division. 5 goes into 19 3 times. 3 times 5 is 15. Subtract. We get 4. Put some zeros here. Bring down to 0. 5 goes into 40 8 times. 8 times 5 is 40. We subtract. We get 0, and we're good. And we get 3.8. And that is it for converting fractions to decimals. It's just division. You can plug it into your calculator. You can do it longhand. Which way you do it does not matter unless it's specified. Don't use a calculator. So there we go. Well, what about converting from a decimal to a fraction? Converting from a decimal to a fraction all depends on whether you know your place values and how to read a decimal number. 1.625. If I know how to read that, remember, to read a decimal and put it into words, we take the whole part, 1, the decimal is and then we read the decimal part as if it was a whole number, 625, and then we look at the place value of the rightmost digit, thousandths. So that's 1 and 625 thousandths. That's 1 and 625 thousandths. If you can read it in words, you can create a fraction. Now, the only thing left in this is that we need to simplify, because 625 thousandths are obviously divisible by some common factors here. So personally, I see a 20, that's 625, that's 1,000, and I know that 25 goes into 100 4 times, right? So 625, so first of all, keep that whole part there, okay? But 625 divided by 25 is 25. So that's 25. 1,000 divided by 25 is 40. So now I have 1 and 25 40ths. Well, I still see that 25 is divisible by 5 and 40 is divisible by 5. So it is equal to 1, and 25 divided by 5 is 5. 40 divided by 5 is 8. And I have 1 and 5/8. And that's our process. If we can read this as a whole number, as a number in words, we can put it into a fraction. What if I have 0.00217? Okay, there's no whole part, but this is 217 tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths. $217 100,000ths. Not divisible by 2, not divisible by 3, not divisible by 4, not divisible by 5. That is divisible by 7, but this is not. So not divisible by 10. So it's a pretty safe bet that 217 100,000ths, that's the best we can do. So like I said, to convert from a decimal to a fraction, we just have to be able to put it into words, and it does it for us. 217 100,000ths. 1 and 625 thousandths. And then simplify if necessary. Well, what about using your calculator to do this? It's really handy if you can have your calculator do this work for you. So I'm going to take a look with a couple different types of calculators, and we're going to do some conversions. Or actually, I'll show the same conversion with different calculators. So let's go for 3/8. So fraction 3/8. So first I'm going to pull out a TI-30X2S. Okay, this is the one that I tend to recommend to people. And if I go 3/8, remember that converting from a fraction to a decimal is just division. So all I have to do is 3 divided by 8, right? I just plugged in 3 divided by 8. I don't know if you can see that very well. And I hit equal, and I get 0.375. Now on the TI-30X2S, right above the PRB button, it says F, and it's got double arrows D. F, and that's right above the PRB button. That's fraction, decimal, decimal, fraction, saying it can go either way. The way we get to that is we hit the second button, and then we hit the PRB button, and that converts fraction decimal. So I have 0.375. If I go second PRB equals, it tells me it's 3/8. If I hit second PRB equals, it goes 0.375. So it will toggle back and forth. So 3/8 is equal to 0.375. If I then go second PRB equals, it will tell me it's 3/8. If I do it again, second PRB equals, it'll tell me it's 0.375, and it'll keep bouncing back and forth. So that's on the TI-30X2S. So that's your method to convert back and forth between fractions and decimals. Next, I'm going to go to a Casio calculator. Okay? And I'm going to do the same thing. So this is on a Casio. And if I do 3 divided by 8 equals, well, on a Casio calculator, it likes to give you the fraction. And we see here, it actually gives me 3/8. So how I change that is, there's a button right above the delete key that says S double arrow D. That S double arrow D button will convert between a fraction and a decimal and back and forth. So if I press that once, it tells me 0.375. If I press it again, it takes me back to 3/8. Press it again, 0.375. Press it again, 3/8. So on a Casio calculator, you just use this S to D button to bounce back and forth between fractions and decimals. So not too bad on that. Another calculator I've got here, this is a TI-30XS multi-view. Now there are a variety of different calculators similar to this, the TI-36X, S and things of that sort, of 36X Pro. These are kind of the multi-view calculators. Now again, 3 divided by 8 equals, and it tells me it's 0.375. Now on this calculator, there is above the table button, it says F double arrow D. So this is a TI-30XS, and it has a table button. And above that table, it says F double arrow D. So F double arrow D. So to get to that, I hit the second button, and then I hit the table button, and then I hit the equals button. So I'm going to go second table, which does that, and enter, and it puts it back to 3/8. If I hit second table, enter again, it puts me back to 0.375. So on these multi-view calculators, you actually go, there's an F to D button or function above, in this case, the table key. And which key it's over may change depending on what version of the calculator you have. Last one I want to show, this is a Texas Instruments TI-83 Plus. Now with this, there is no conversion button here. I'm going to do my 3/8, and I get 0.375. What I have to do now is I have to go into the math function. So I hit the math button, and it gives me this set of menus. And if we look down, we see that the first one is arrow fraction, the second one is arrow decimal. So I'm as a decimal now, so I'm going to click on arrow fraction. What it does is it says it's going to take that answer, that 0.375, and it's going to convert to a fraction. I hit enter, and it tells me it's 3/8. If I want to convert it back to a decimal, I hit that math thing, and I go down to arrow decimal, which is number 2. So now I'm going to take that 3/8 and turn it into a decimal. It tells me it's 0.375. So really nice if you learn how to use your calculator to do these conversions. And remember, once you know how to use your calculator to do these conversions, it can also simplify your fractions for you. So very important to know how to use your calculator. But that takes care of fractions and decimals.